One thing that amazes me about New York City is I get to see a lot of open data communities across the United States. Fortunately was elected by my peers, to be on the Code for America's community advisory panel. And one thing that blows my mind is seeing kind of our communities across the United States and the type of infrastructure that they have, or really what they don't have when it comes to advocacy organizations and elders who have been making wins happen while we were in our diapers. And so it's a great honor to have BetaNYC as a member of the Transparency Working Group, and it's a great honor to have one of those elders here, John Kaehny, to come talk about kind of our history. And John, thank you again for coming up here. If it wasn't for John, I probably wouldn't be standing up here in front of you. So John, thank you.
I just want to clarify that I'm not Noel's father and I don't feel that old. But my name's John Kaehny. I'm Executive Director of Reinvent Albany, and I'm also co-chair of the New York City Transparency Working Group, which is a coalition of the larger civic groups in this city, good government groups, BetaNYC, and other groups. And we were a big force in making the New York City open data law happen, and we continue to advocate for freedom of information law at the state level, at the city level, and open data in both the city and state. We're into all things that are about putting public information online in formats that are easy to find and use for the public, you and me. And so our mission is making open data work for you and work for government and make sure that it keeps working. And so that's really going to be the theme of my brief remarks here today. I just want to read something that I think is totally cool that was written 40 years ago by the New York State Legislature, of all places, that benighted body today. But they wrote something really great 40 years ago, which is the Freedom of Information Law for New York State. And it was a really different time, a time of optimism, a time when people were embracing Enlightenment thinking, that is, empiricism, freedom, realization of self and society together, all of these great themes. And this led, and this is the guiding spirit behind the New York City open data law and a lot of civic society in New York. And what the legislature wrote and the governor signed was something that led off with this. A free society is maintained when government is responsive and responsible to the public, and when the public is aware of government actions. The more open a government is with the people, the greater the understanding and participation of the public in government. It is incumbent upon government to extend public accountability wherever and whenever feasible. And that's the New York City open data law in the digital age, in the information age, in the web age, whatever you want to call this time we have now. That is the spirit that guides this. So when we look at days like today or our work with the city council or other activities, these are the words that guide us. That's the spirit that infuses us, which is this really simple idea that is, we are the people, the government belongs to us, and some days that can be forgotten. And we work in the trenches, we work on legislation, we do lobbying, we do all that stuff, showing up at city council meetings, and some days you forget that that's the basic idea. So I have a little copy of this in my phone. I look at it sometimes, I find it inspiring, and I think you would too. I'm just going to talk very, very briefly about freedom of information law and open data, which if you geek out on open data, you see that there's people talking about it on blogs and stuff. And I bought this little flashlight, which was my daughter's flashlight from camp a couple summers ago, and it made me think about freedom of information law. This is freedom of information law. Very powerful, very narrow beam, great for looking in closets, under bunk beds, under covers, all those places, in filing cabinets, even stuff like that. This is a powerful tool, very powerful tool. It is the basis for open government, this little flashlight. I'll put it in my pocket. Open data are these lights. They light up the entire room. And if you think about where we live, our city, as a big giant house that we all live in, say a big giant house that is big as the Metropolitan Museum of Art, that has tons and tons of closets in it and little nooks and crannies, you realize pretty quickly that if this is your biggest tool for exploring, you're not going to get so far. That's why we need to keep the lights on. And turning the lights on is open data. Open data doesn't allow us to look into every filing cabinet, into every closet, but it allows us to look at a glance all over the place. And we can see all those filing cabinets and all those secret doors and all those stairways and that whole map, that whole navigation. And it allows us to not have to waste enormous amounts of time trying to figure out what the big picture is. It allows us to spend time getting the insights that help us in whatever we do, whether that's helping homeless people, keeping the police accountable, making sure that public money is well spent, all of those things. That's what open data is about. It's about big overhead lights that allow us to look around a whole room and then to zero in, to zoom in on narrow things. So open data and freedom of information law, they do not compete, they complement. They're the same spirit and just different aspects of that spirit. So I just wanted to say that for the record, to get it out there. You know who I'm talking to. Anyway, what does the open data law do, and what are we doing in New York City? The open data law and all the things that we're talking about today are expectations. The open data law is an expectation. It's a codification. A lot of people here are developers. They write code all day. This is a law that is, in fact, not enforceable by the public. We can't sue under the open data law. It is a written expectation. It is a framework for action. It is a guidebook for government on what they're supposed to do with their data. So it allows city council to hold government accountable, but ultimately the open data law lives and dies in open data in New York on usage and how much it's used and how much you use it. And the reason you are here today is to learn how to use the city's open data platform, data systems in new, innovative ways, and to get inspired by each other to do that. So advocacy only goes so far. We helped get this child born in the open data law, but it's your job to raise it now and to bring it up to maturity. And that's what events like this are today. They're about making open data a living, breathing, successful thing. And I can't emphasize to you how important it is that you tell people that represent you in city government, a city council member, somebody on a community board, somebody in city government, that you use open data, okay? That it matters to you. It really, really matters, even if one person says that. And everything you do, all of your work products, please, please, please make sure that you say, credit New York City open data law. If you're doing analysis or you're using data, that matters tremendously because it allows us to show use cases of open data and to justify its use. Nobody in city government wants to do work that is not useful to the public and doesn't help them get their job done. And if they don't see people using open data, they're not going to do the work. And if they don't do the work, the data is going to stink, and then you're not going to use it. And we'll have a negative cycle, and we've already seen this happen a couple of years ago, where things kind of started falling apart. The public stopped having confidence in some of the public data, and it's happened all over the country in different ways. And then there was a kind of lull and a lack of interest in open data. And the positive feedback cycle here is your usage, you're reaching out to government, you're telling government, hey, there's an issue with this data, and government fixing that. And then people having more and more confidence in the data and picking it up. Now, New York City has 3 major stakeholders for open data politically. Just so you know this, I'm giving you the broad view. One is you, the public, and that's a very broad spectrum. That's from community boards to big data miners to all kinds of folks, academics, public interest groups, etc., the public. Then there's city council, which is its own thing, and I want you to know New York City Council has been awesome on New York City open data. It might be the best legislative body in the world, and I want to give a shout out to Jimmy Vaca, who's chair of the New York City Technology Committee, Gail Brewer, who's going to be here in a moment, who helped pass and write the open data law. We have really strong champions in city council, and that matters a lot. And then the other group is government, the unelected government, the agencies, the people who actually own, produce, curate that data. And they are hugely important stakeholders because if they don't see value in open data, it ain't going to happen. And so one of the most important challenges that we face as advocates for open data is getting government to see the value in it and to use it themselves. And in terms of future issues, the one thing we're looking at, probably the most importantly, and I hope that Amin-Ra Mashariki will talk about this a little bit, is government using open data for itself and finding it a good way to go and good operation. So Government using that data is really important. You using that data is really important. And you telling people you're using it is really important. I've seen a ton of articles, incidentally, in WNYC and the New York Times that are clearly using open data that do not credit it. And that hurts us. So if you're writing stuff, if you're doing anything, if you have an app that's powered by the open data platform, say so, okay? And you're supposed to anyway under terms of use, I think. So the number of issues that that we're working with in open data are huge, but what they come down to is continuous improvement and continuing to expect more and more all the time. And when you listen to advocates like us, you'll see that we walk a tightrope. It's called thank and spank in advocacy world. And that means that we have to walk a tightrope between thanking government all the time and spanking them sometimes when they're not doing their job. It's kind of an infantilizing thing, but that's what it's called. With open data, we're very, very lucky in New York City to have people in the mayor's office and the Department of Information Technology do it, who love open data, who totally get it, who are butt kickers and are doing a great job. And shout out to Amin Ra in the corner over here who leads Moda's team. He's the point person on open data for New York City. You should give him a little round of applause. The guy's great. Amin is our advocate in government. And the challenge for Amin is that all agencies do not embrace open data, and they're not infused with that spirit, and they don't, wake up every morning and read foil quotes for themselves like others might do. And they just think of it as extra work, because we're at that point now still where open data is something that's ahead of the curve. We're still visionaries, right? We haven't institutionalized this. This is not par for the course. This is not the normal thing. So people like Amin have to actively advocate within government for that. And that means that we're still not in the place that we want to be, because we want to get in the place where the average person that is a data owner within a city agency understands why they should be using open data. And we probably only have one agency that they've really incorporated into their workflow, and that's the Taxi and Limousine Commission right now. That doesn't mean nobody else gets it, nobody else is doing cool stuff, but if the open data effort went away tomorrow, that's probably be the agency that would be like, oh, no. And so we need to get that point where we have many, many agencies. The other thing I wanted to say is that I've spent many, many years fighting in freedom of information lawsuits and trying to get government information. And what you're doing here, when you make simple requests for data or simple comments on the open data portal or the city's open data landing page, is you're pushing government openness. Even stuff that's really benign, like how many bushes are planted in Prospect Park data set, please put that on the open data portal, whatever, stuff like that, that you might think is mundane, or potholes, or building violations, or crashes. That's all pushing government openness. That's all creating a culture of government openness. And so from an advocacy perspective and a free society perspective, we think that's totally cool. Elevator violations, great, let's get them. Let's see if city inspectors are inspecting elevators. Let's look at that. Where are the violations? All that stuff adds up into free and open society. So I know people here are writing apps. They want to make a living. They want to, have a good startup and things like that. But you matter. You matter to open government. All that pushing is pushing together. Whether you're in academia, public interest group, that all adds up. And we are on the front lines in city council, working with city legislators. We do a lot of work with the state legislature. And let me tell you, that stuff is cumulative and important. And even small things that you say do matter. So, when you're sitting there like, shit, today sucks, what's good about today, let me tell you that the little efforts that you make, no, really, that's just, a lot of people don't like who the president is, stuff like that. We're not going to go there, but this effort right now with New York City Open Data is one of the coolest things going, right, in the United States. And we get calls from all over the world. For real, Noel can tell you. People come over, how did you guys do this? What happens? Well, why do you do that? And the simple answer is, we can do this because we have a community of people who have an expectation. That's really it. So if there's something that's not working for you with City Open Data, you need to say something, okay? You need to use the comment, start off the internal way, use the comment portal and say, this doesn't work. You need to talk to your friends. You need to contact the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics and the city's open data team. But do not sit there and just say, I'm not going to use this open data platform because the data on it's no good as far as and I found a lot of mistakes on it. No, You can do better, we can do better. It's continuous improvement based on your expectations. So keep your expectations high and keep pushing and keep publicly pushing. And this thing is going to get better and better and better. And every time you make a little complaint or you make a little comment, it helps our advocates in government. It doesn't hurt them, it helps them. It helps Amin-Ra Mashariki. It helps the city's open data team. So do not be shy about that. Just keep pushing, keep expecting more, keep learning more, keep using more, and we can make this, really, really one of the greatest tools that we have right now for expanding open society and freedom, frankly, in small and lots of little ways. So thank you.